Let's bring in Deborah DeMoss Fonseca from the group Conservatives Against Trump. Now, when Donald Trump was asked if the party needs to be together, united, his answer was, no, I don't think so. Now, you're a proud Conservative. What damage is being done to the party as you knew it?
Well, I think you're exactly right. As I knew it, and as we knew it, we the people knew it. And there are many of us concerned. It's a growing grassroots movement across the country that are extremely concerned about Donald Trump being the voice of conservatism and the voice of the Republican Party. But this is way beyond the Republican Party now. This is a fight for the heart and soul of our country now and of the conservative message. Donald Trump, as we are hearing him and as I've heard him for the last 11 months, is not the voice of conservatives, and it certainly is not the party of Lincoln and Reagan.
Is that because you don't believe he's a true conservative? And what I'm trying to say is, if you could expand on that and help our audience understand why your group, Conservatives Against Trump, will not back Trump, and what it is about him, what does he represent that you don't identify with?
Well, I think there are a number of things. I think, number one, he's the majority of our group, everyone in our group would say, first of all, that we will not vote for Hillary Clinton. We will not vote for Donald Trump, but we will vote. And I want to make that clear. And we are concerned about the people down ballot, which would be the local and the state elections, and the drag that Donald Trump is being on them. We now have states in play that for the Democrats that have always been safe Republican states, and that's of great concern. And it's because Donald Trump he has never been a Republican, much less a conservative. He has not shared our values. There have been candidates in the past that many of us have supported at the end of the primary that maybe we didn't support during the primary because they supported most of our core values and most of the platform of the Republican Party. But Donald Trump is somebody who has been giving contributions over his entire lifetime to liberal Democrats, to left-wing politicians. He says he's an outsider, and that was enough to get some people to come over to his side. But he's really the ultimate insider. He's the ultimate politician. He's been making deals his whole life with politicians from the other side and with banks. And I think we're concerned that people don't know what he would do when he came in. He has no philosophy, no ideology. His only ideology is self-promotion and authoritarianism. Deborah, and I think that's a very dangerous mix.
Well, Tea Party favourite Sarah Palin says she thinks Republicans should throw aside Speaker Paul Ryan because she sees that he's going against the will of the people. And I suppose my question would be, didn't the party do this to themselves by, over many years, and the Democrats for that matter as well, ignoring the realities on the street, the will of the grassroots, and pandered to the wealthy and the self-interest groups? That's what the criticism is. Did the party create this?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that about 10 million people in the Republican Party primary voted for Donald Trump. Now, that was a lot of states had open primaries, which means that Democrats or independents could come in and vote. And so one could say that they were not, one knows that those were not all Republicans. And he had 10 million votes in the primary process. And there have been more than 15 million people that have voted for someone else other than Donald Trump. And I think there is something to what you are saying. I think we understand that there is a lot of frustration out there. Everybody in our group is frustrated about the country. We're all concerned about the future of the country. But you don't just say, we don't like Hillary Clinton, therefore we are going to support whoever is on this side, regardless the cost. I think the cost is very, very high of putting Donald Trump at the head of the ticket when his only ideology is self-promotion, and his tendencies and the way he has talked have been authoritarianism. Right. And he has also isolated. It would be very difficult for him to win, short of Hillary Clinton being indicted, because he has alienated large sectors, huge swaths of the entire electorate, starting with women and continuing on to Latinos and continuing on to Muslims and to the disabled, and just about anybody else that he has been able to offend, he has done so.
So then,
that
Deborah,
is not the comportment of a president or a commander-in-chief.